Be turning to Exodus 16 then, if you would. Exodus 16, as you see the title there, is tonight. We're going to have cake and ice cream after all for anything else. One that called remembers things that we know, things that it's easy for me to do. So share the message as a confessional, show scriptures against shooting against myself. And then maybe, hopefully you'll pray for me in this way and I can do better. But I find myself murmuring about murmurers, and the Lord's convicted me about it. Kind of when Kevin was here, and Donnie was with Kevin all the time. And the story here I heard about was Kevin was a bus driver, and they was having to work on a bus about something. And somehow in another conversation, Donnie mentioned that it was probably because of the interstate speeds on the gravel that Kevin drove. And I said, well, it's probably because he drives the interstate speeds on the gravel that it need to work on this. And then afterward, Kevin said something, Donnie, what are you talking about? And Donnie said, well, the interstate, minimum 35. So, you're driving 35, and ain't saying you wasn't driving 70, but just kind of the expectations, backwards there a little bit. It's not the good traits. It's what got Moses in trouble. Because why did Moses not get to cross the river? Why did Moses not get to go in the promised land? Because he got negative and complaining, because they complained to him. He heard so much, and then he kind of vaunted himself a little bit, but he complained about their complaining. And because of that, he didn't get to cross the river. Were they a bunch of complainers? Yeah, most certainly they were. But the fact that Moses turned into a complainer like them, it cost him the privilege to cross over into the promised land. So again, that aspect, I can say I can relate to Moses in that aspect. And I want to do better. But, murmuring is something that is easy to hear. It's easy to do. And I can try to be positive about things, but then I find myself murmuring about murmurers. And across the board, soccer time's on right now, but soccer anymore it's almost easy. It's just don't even sweat, don't worry about it. But church, people murmuring in church, I get to murmuring in other congregations, our congregation, other people, and then the politics, murmuring is just I've heard. So I thought I'd just share this to myself. But in Exodus 16:1, and they took their journey from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came into the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said unto them, would to God we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the flesh pots, and when we did eat bread to the full, for ye had brought us forth into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Then said the Lord unto Moses, behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain rate every day. Murmured against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Now they were murmuring against them. In practice, have you ever noticed how most people murmur, though, in our modern times, and in how we murmur in practice? We complain really bold sometimes, but we really don't get that way till someone else is complaining with us, till we form a group, so we get a little pack going. We get a little pack mentality going where everyone, we feel supported, we feel validated and stuff. But murmuring starts with a little bit of a, you're wrong. And I can speak to myself with this. A lot of times something will happen and at the house with Elizabeth, or in the house, or what around, do something, and I'll murmur under my breath something. Elizabeth will say, what'd you say? How many times do you think I repeat what I said? I lose my boldness real quick. Oh, nothing. I know I shouldn't have said that real quick. What'd you say? Oh, nothing. Oh, I said you're pretty. It's just, I totally back out and chicken out. But yet when we know someone else has your back and agree with you, then that's when you start getting bold. But as a rule, most people's murmuring, you're wrong when you start doing it. Because unless you have support as a group. So here they were murmuring. Let's go to Numbers 14. And still murmuring, and over and over and over again we find where they murmured, And oh, Moses, I think I put up with some stuff, but I don't touch nothing. My worst day I've ever had, Moses probably would have thought was vacation day. He was like, really? You're letting that sweat you? Because he dealt with stuff I cannot imagine. But in verse 1 of Numbers 14, and all the congregation lifted up, and the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And again, I wanted to point out that, and all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them. But again, most time it starts with a few, right? Starts with a few that start planting the seeds, and they say it, and they know who to say it to. They don't make it boldly to Moses. They didn't go to Moses up front, did they? You don't think all of a sudden one day they all decided to complain against Moses as a group? Or it just kind of started with undercurrent, started with a few, and was going in. It starts, and it grows, and we can control ourselves, though, whether we help it grow by participating. And verse 3, and wherefore hath the Lord brought us into this land, to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be prey? Were it not better for us to return into Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain, and let us return into Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And they have another encounter, just a repeated history. And in your time at home and your studies, read more, but let's jump to Psalms 106 now. I'm not going to read the encounter in the Old Testament to Moses. I want to read the reference that David had recording about it, about what happened to Moses. And Psalms 106 and verse 32, they angered him also at the waters of strife, so that it went ill with Moses for their sakes, because they provoked his spirit, so that he spake unadvisedly with his lips. They did not destroy the nations concerning whom the Lord commanded them. And it keeps reading, but the people were wrong. But Moses was still responsible for what came out of his mouth. They were wrong, but he still was responsible. I can become so frustrated with another person's bad attitude that I develop a bad attitude toward their bad attitude. And, and we know it today. We hear it about the intolerance towards intolerance. But I can get this bad attitude, but the phrasing I can relate to in verse 33, because they provoked his spirit, so that he spake unadvisedly with his lips. Because we're supposed to speak the words of grace, the words of love, about how we should control our lips and our tongues, and we should speak the words of grace and love of Christ speaking through us. But yet here, the unadvisedly with his lips is because he started complaining. If you go back and read when he struck the rock the second time, because they were murmuring about that, and he complained about, would we have to do this? He was complaining to them about their complaining about being thirsty. Don't you have trust in God? Do we have to bring this to you again? Did Aaron and I have to? He lifted himself up, but yet by complaining about them. So we got to be careful. I've got to be careful. And 1 Corinthians 10, murmuring is an example that we have in the Old Testament. Repeatedly, they murmured. The easiest person for murmuring to deceive may be the person convinced already that I'm not the one with the problem. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem murmuring. They got a bad attitude. But I can recognize murmuring in somebody else so clear that I begin blind to the version of it that I'm doing. And fell in one day 23,000. Now some of them also murmured and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happened unto them for examples, and they were all written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. So the murmuring, again, I want us to just look at practice and look at how we see it happening today, and look at how we participate in it ourselves. How it starts small, but then it grows and grows and grows. And the more murmuring, it starts off as a murmur. It's kind of funny that I became a pastor and a public speaker because in school, Mrs. Margaret Bonnell was my speech teacher, and she got on to me all the time about having a mush mouth, murmurer. I got to dictate better and over enunciate, and she would always use mush mouth. And stop murmuring, mush mouth. As I would be giving speeches, that was, stop murmuring, mush mouth. But now I speak all the time, and I probably still murmur and mush mouth, but oh well. Murmuring is something that is kind of under the breath. You say it not 100% confident how it's going to be received, and then when it's received well, then you start saying it louder, then you start saying it bolder, and it grows. But if we would not support it when it was just a mumble, if we would do what was that now? If you challenge it when it's small, it doesn't grow as big. But if you chime in with it and you join in with it, then it grows. And even if you're not murmuring about the same thing that they're murmuring about, if you're murmuring about them murmuring, ultimately Satan wins, right? That's sowing discord. Because one of the things that God hates, we can read in the scriptures, is sowing discord. Don't help the fire spread. I may not have started the fire a lot of times, but I still carry the flame around. And neat thing about a fire, especially why you think in dry weather and dry season, we see all the don't burn bans everywhere, because one fire can start another fire real easy, right? So when someone's murmuring about one thing, if we murmur about them murmuring, that's just another fire springing up off of that one. So don't spread or help the fire. In verse 5 of James 3, even so the tongue is a little member, and boasteth great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. The tongue is a fire, on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire and tamed of mankind, but the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. Therefore bless we God, even the Father, and therewith curse we man, which are made after the similitude of God. Out of the same mouth proceed blessings and cursings. My brethren, these things ought not so. That's what the tongue does, right? Speaks unadvisedly with his lips, because he was just murmuring because they were murmuring. And here, our tongues can be hard to consider too. Somebody else can be murmuring about things, and I just jump in. Cannot be different. Philippians 2:12 says this: Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed God, which worketh in you both to will and do of his good pleasure, do all things without murmurings and disputings, that ye may be blameless and harmless, the sons of God, without rebuke, in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation, among whom ye shine as lights in the world, holding forth the word of life, that I may rejoice in the day of Christ, that I have not run in vain, neither labored in vain. But 14 said, do all things. About their murmuring, Jesus did not allow what came toward him to determine what came out of him. What a beautiful statement we could hopefully live. Remember, hear it again. Jesus did not allow what came toward him to determine what came out of him. And we can stop the chain if we allow the Spirit to do it through us. Moses ended up doing it. Moses ended up responding how he got. We can break the chain through Christ, but not in our own flesh. 1 Peter 2:20, giving us an example that reviled not again. When he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously. And it's so easy to murmur, but verse 22, who did no sin, it was guile found in his mouth for no reason. We can't, just because we may think there's a just cause, just because someone else may be murmuring, there's a drastic difference. And much like we talk about gossiping at times, it depends on why you're saying it. If you're asking for a prayer request, if you're asking about, remember Brother Jared, he was kind of negative the other day. We need to remember Brother Jared in prayer, that the Lord hold him up and strengthen him. That would be a good conversation, right? But yet if it was like, Brother Jared was pretty negative yesterday. All he did was just badmouth, blah, blah, blah. If in turn you're murmuring and complaining about my murmuring and complaining, then what's the difference? So we have to be different by the grace and influence of God. Amen? So no guile found in your mouth, period. Not for a good reason. What was the truth? He was negative. Well, yeah, but so pray about it. Don't join him in it. Just pray about it. So just share with each other. I hope that this is an exclusive problem to me. But